Hello, everybody, on this lovely August Sunday afternoon. It's glorious out there, nice and warm. Welcome, Heather. Thank you for being here today. We are just talking about something that can be known as anticipatory grief, right?
Right.
How's your garden going?
It's good. It's good. Yes, anticipatory grief for that is because it's coming to an end. But I pulled out a few things this week in terms of clearing them out. But I have more zucchinis growing, and the apples and the pears are starting to come in, and all that fun stuff. So yeah, it's good.
And that's exactly it. I mean, we do all this loving work with our gardens.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, whenever we do anything, we have this excitement. When we start seeing the fruits of our labor, especially
Yeah.
with your kale or zucchinis this year, they
Yeah.
just come fast and hard. And all of a sudden you've got 95 zucchinis, and it's like, I cannot do anything with these. You start handing out your vegetables and your fruits, or you just end up eating like a pure fruit and vegetable diet. And then it does come where it slows down,
Yeah.
and and we're talking about it in regards to a garden, but this can be in human life. Maybe we see our parents and they're slowing down, and one day you look at them and you know that there's something that they used to do easily, and now you're noticing that it takes them more
Right.
to do something. And that can give us a melancholy, almost like a sadness. Yet I think that's also a gift, right? Because then we do appreciate the zucchinis that we're getting.
Right.
And we're going,
Yeah.
I want to be able to use everything that I'm growing. I want to be able to preserve this season uh, in a positive way, even when
Right.
it comes to maybe our parents slowing down or our kids speeding up, looking for more independence. So, this is really what anticipatory or pre grief is is known as. And I know that I did a blog about this with the Ethan, who I met at the food bank, and he enjoyed COVID because he was in university and he got to go home and spend time with his family under the same roof because his younger brother was 14. And he knew, in the description of the story to me, he knew that life would never be the same. And so he was savoring every moment. What are your thoughts on that, Heather?
Well, I think that's exactly it, right? Is that anticipatory grief, it happens all the time. And even if we're not aware of it, and sometimes it's big things, like you say, looking at your parents and seeing that decline happening, or looking at your kids and realizing they're growing up too fast, that kind of thing. So you know that you're gonna have to say goodbye to certain routines, certain patterns, certain things that have happened. But sometimes it's true, it's that accumulation, right, of small things, right, such as, I know that in another 4 weeks, give or take, I'm not gonna have stuff in my garden for, another 6 months, kind of idea, right? And there's those kind of things. So I think, and I think there's all sorts of those small kinds of anticipatory griefs that we know happen, especially this time of year. Summer is ending. We're getting back into the routine of work and school and that kind of idea. Knock on wood, we're hopefully getting back into that routine that that we haven't had for the last 2 years. But I think part of the thing with anticipatory grief is, as you say, it is a gift, but we have to be careful not to get caught up in the sadness of it. Because, I mean, not to ignore the sadness of it, we want to acknowledge it, but not to get caught up in it, and to take that as that ability to live in the moment, right? And to cherish that moment even more, rather than get caught up in the anticipatory side of it, and thinking about, oh my gosh, this is going to happen, this is going to end, this is going to stop, and you take yourself out of the moment. And I think that's one of the key things for me with anticipatory grief, is not to get wrapped up in the what's going to happen, because we know it'll happen. We may not know when, but we know it's going to happen. and not to get wrapped up in that, but to get wrapped up in the, okay, this is going to happen. So what do I need to do now to relish that moment? Even as something as simple as, yes, my garden is going to be gone in 4 weeks. What do I need to do now? Now I just need to go out and enjoy it. I need to go out and, enjoy even taking out the plants that are finished for the season. Just enjoy being in the dirt and getting the dirt ready for next spring and that kind of stuff. I need to enjoy those moments rather than dwell on the fact that it's going to be gone in a month, right? And I think that's the hard part with anticipatory grief, is that you can find yourself focusing on the end that is eventually going to come rather than focusing on what does that give me for right now.
Exactly. Exactly. And I met this guy in a plane once. And when I lived in Cayman and in the Bahamas, more so in Cayman, because Cayman was 80 to 100 degrees, sunny or rainy. And although there's certain plants that would have a differing kind of foliage, for the most part, it was the same all the time. And I talked about why I loved having the four seasons.
Mm.
And that's because we are also, when it comes to change, like if you look at the difference between schools out, parents are going, because they have to, find something for those children to do for the next. But for us as kids, we would like, oh yeah, we could go investigate ravines, or at least that was when we were kids. Whereas when it comes to school going back in, that's really a time of new beginnings. Even though we were just briefly talking about it, we have New Year's in January. That's a new calendar year, but this is really the new year.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting that, first of all, the great thing that you said was not to be able to get wrapped up in it, but to be able to, paraphrasing, to appreciate the moments that we have right now. Yeah. And I think that that's one thing that comes with age, but you can see like children get really anxious, right? Anxiety is about forward thinking and not being able to control it, instead of saying, well, what are the clothes I'm going to wear on the first day of school? And, okay, well, I may not have any friends, but who knows who I'm going to meet, and, that kind of stuff. But it's like, the one thing he said, this man on the plane, was that the anticipating, you're able to embrace the different seasons. So now our gardens are going, our leaves are starting to turn orange, red. And that again in itself has its own beauty. Fall has its own beauty, the crispness, the temperatures, the hikes, or whatever is going on. And then when it comes to winter, it's everybody. I mean, it's lovely when you get that first snowfall. We don't like the rest of the snow, but it's like that nice white, and it's like, oh, it looks so pretty. And then again, so it's the cyclical part of it that I found, and I think this is again a good appreciation. When I was living in the islands and it was just sunny or rainy, I didn't find that there was an excitement of seasons as much. Like I didn't find, because there was nothing that indicated that something's changing. And so in the part that you were talking about, we want to be able to acknowledge that, yeah, our garden, thank you, Mother Earth, for giving us all this plentiful bounty, all that kind of stuff. You want to be able to appreciate that. But so you want to get the fine balance where it's like, okay, how is it that I am choosing to live because of these changes? These are the big ones, as you said, but say you're anticipating retirement and it's like, oh, I don't know, I'm not, or if we're not doing lunches, how am I going to have a social, what's my social calendar looking like if I'm not having? So part of this is really anticipating what you may have as grief whenever we know that we have these upcoming changes. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's exactly it, right? It's the knowing, because we have that benefit of knowing, right? If we're looking at anticipatory grief, I mean, when you're looking at grief from a sudden loss, or an unexpected loss, it's something you have to move through, but it's something that comes out of nowhere, right? with anticipatory grief, at least we have the ability to know something is coming, right? And it might be a great thing. You know, that person who's looking at retiring might be thrilled that they're retiring and that they're getting to do all the things that they wanted to do that they couldn't do before with the job. But there is also the grief of the job, right? Of leaving that job. And although it might be a fabulous thing, there's still a moment to acknowledge that, right? And I think that that is what it is. It gives you that ability to look at those moments. And you had the phrase there a few minutes ago of the beauty of the moment, right? What is the beauty of that moment for you? And yes, there are things that are going to be coming, good, bad, or otherwise. And good, bad, or otherwise, it's going to cause some kind of grief, as we talk about, right? The end of change in a pattern, a familiar pattern of behavior, right? So whether that's a good or bad thing, it still is something that you're going to grieve, but it gives you that ability to look at the moment, the now, and what is that? Yes, it's going to come, but what does that afford me right now that I can be grateful for, that I can be thankful for, that I can appreciate more, that I can take those moments, right? That kind of thing, right? And as we said, just even the small things like going into the garden, or those big things like, you know, going back to school or retiring from a job or just getting back into the routine of work, right? Especially from the past couple of years, people are getting back into more of an in-office work routine or a combination routine, but getting back into a more familiar routine pattern because it's been so disrupted for the last a couple of years. But it means that your old routines are disappearing, right? And as we said, September tends to be kind of a new year for most of us, and we tend to kind of fall into that pattern of starting things again in September. And I think that's what it gives you. It gives you that ability to look at that and say, what is it that right now I can be grateful for, even though I'm going to lose that in another couple of weeks when I start school, or in another couple of weeks when I retire, or in another few months when this happens. Even for the big stuff. I mean, anticipatory grief is obviously a big factor in terminal illness, right? And again, yes, you're going to acknowledge the fact that it's coming and that it's happening, but what does it give you that moment of being grateful for in that moment? What do you have to say and be present with that person and say, this is what I'm grateful for. This is what I'm glad that we can do this.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, this brings up another point when it comes to, you know, the whole death and dying and end of life is there's a lot of times that because we can't or won't uh, acknowledge that this may be down the road.
Yeah.
And by having that, you can either sort of sit down and talk about the business. And by that, I mean, how do we want our end of life? How can I support you as the person that doesn't have that diagnosis? And in the cases of things like dementia and Alzheimer's, it can be really hard when because you're almost grieving that relationship twice. You're grieving the person who has had a noticeable cognitive change. And then when it comes to actual death, which could be years later without them even knowing who you are, that's a whole other thing. But again, I think it's important to note that's why sometimes, like when you have a sudden death, when it's unexpected, it's almost cleaner. It's like ripping off the band-aid, right? And
right.
like there is like a line, which is the anticipatory grief is like, oh, you know, especially with a parent, when we start noticing that they're not as strong as they used to be, or they can't do the things that we still look at them in our child eyes because they've been our parents our whole lives. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts is when we can actually notice and be aware that responsibility is now changing, and really come to understand, you know, we have 365 days in a year. How many weekends do we have? I have a friend that plans out every single weekend. She doesn't want any of them to go to waste.
Right.
Now, what is going to waste for you? That's the thing. Are you doing busy stuff with people, or are you making sure that you're getting your family and, putting those big boulders in the jar first before we put the smaller? So what are your values? What are the things that matter to you? And youth aside, because let's face it, when we're in our 20s, everything's an adventure and we just want to go out and go crazy. We don't want to spend time with our family. But once we get into having families of our own, or people that have really strong family roots, then that's sort of it. It's like, okay, well, what does being part of a family mean to me? So it's really about, all this stuff can be melancholy and can be painful and can be sad, but you can also take this, more importantly, to say, how is it? And I know this is how I came to my beliefs, is like, if I'm around somebody else and I'm watching their decline, I want to be able to support myself or anybody else that's around that person by holding space for them, because you have a whole ton of emotions. This is the great thing about being human, but you want to be able to process whatever you can so that you can be present.
Yes.
So journaling or talking to somebody or whatever, even doing the grief recovery method is, again, that's what I love about it, is that it allows you to look at your relationships now. So if people are alive, let's look at it now. Oh, wow, I've got this awareness. How am I going to show up in this relationship differently? Am I going to have more boundaries? Am I going to choose to spend more time? Because I don't know what my mother wanted to do when she was a young woman. I just always assumed she wanted to be my mother. So, there's these kinds of conversations that you may or may not want to have. Or, maybe even if it's a parent, maybe it's getting a little bit of space if we spend every single day with them. Because at some point, we will be separated, right? So that's an anticipatory grief that can cause, again, more anxiety, like getting our independence, and so that we can be interdependent, I'm not sure that's the right one, not interdependent, like, so that we can, I'm not getting the right word.
I think interdependent is correct. You want to be interdependent, not codependent.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that you can be independent but interdependent. So but not codependent. So yeah.
Exactly.
No, and yes, I think that is the benefit of anticipatory grief, right? We start the journey to death from the moment we're born. So if you can acknowledge that in your life, then it allows you to take each moment as it comes. And it's not to say that you shouldn't plan, you shouldn't look forward, you shouldn't do all of those kind of things. You certainly should, but you also want to use that to inform how you're living in the present, and to make sure you're actually living in the present and not just completely living in the future or completely living in the past and dwelling on what coulda, shoulda, woulda happened, or dwelling on the future of oh my gosh, at some point this is going to happen, and what am I going to do when it happens, and how do I, no, instead of the anxiety and the melancholy and that kind of thing, how does that inform how you live right now and what you choose to do right now?
Exactly. So that's I know this is a topic, and we should definitely go into things like retirement, and maybe we'll just do one of our next shows on just job related, because there's a whole bunch of stuff too, right? Especially with COVID. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to do job related. But so I just encourage everybody in these last couple of weeks, because the CNE started.
Yep.
So that means that summer's coming to an end. I know this
exactly. And it's one of the signs of the end of summer.
Exactly. The CNE is here. And so I encourage you, we've just had a new moon, and so what this is about, and again, I look at this as, and one of the reasons I like following a druid mindset, heart set, is that this is really this is the end of the harvest. This is the beginning of the end of the harvest, right? So and that's what luge was. Luge was August 1st, and that's when we start pulling the bounty from the earth.
Right.
And so now is just really interesting to be able to say, okay, let's look at even the last gardening season. Let's look at the last 6 months. Where have I grown? What is the stuff that I was looking at? And just to keep that cycle going. So it's not, things aren't traumatic and dramatic. It's just, okay, this was a tougher season.
Yeah.
Getting back to the garden analogy, maybe there was more bugs. Maybe people steal your garlic. It's okay. I'm almost over that.
Not over, through.
True. Oh, it's garlic. My goodness. But but seriously, it's again, take a look at how this last has influenced the way that you think, and really becoming aware of those kinds of things. Because I know that end of life, end of anything can be challenging emotionally.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you're more than capable, because you've done it before. You will do it again. Exactly. And once we talk about jobs and we talk about transferable skills, this is one of those transferable skills. Whatever we can own, and this includes the past. We don't want to wallow, as you said back there, but we do want to go and have a look and say, okay, is there something you want to tell me? Is there something that I need to know? And then once that's there, then it's amazing how it doesn't come back. So instead, you're living intentionally instead of ignoring signs that there's something else that wants to come out, letting your heart tell the story.
Exactly.
Any final thoughts, Heather?
I would echo all of that, but I would also say that not just to look back at the last few months, but also to look forward as to what's coming up and what you're already anticipating that you're not acknowledging, right? If there's things that are going to come that are going to be difficult, but you haven't acknowledged that. And maybe that is the start of school, or maybe that is something, maybe it's a family get together for Thanksgiving, maybe it's a Christmas vacation, whatever that is, that is something that is coming. Again, back to the anticipatory, right? It's something that you anticipate that's coming that is causing you anxiety and stress without your acknowledging it, and you're just trying to avoid it. And do the same thing. Take a look back for sure and inform your now, but take a look forward and use that to inform your now. Why is that causing you anxiety? What is the underlying factor there? And take a moment to look at that, and as you say, to own it. And that will help your now and hopefully your future. So.
Well, and I guess, and just to finish up, because I know a lot of people say, I'm living my best life, I'm being my best self. Even with statements like that, you are doing all of that already. You don't have to say it out loud. What we are doing is every moment we have the opportunity. Again, it's your life, it's your choice. Every day is a new beginning. All of that stuff, they're cliches, but the whole part about it is owning that. So it's no longer a cliche. That it's like, okay, I'm making the best choices I can now. And again, as you say, looking in the future and saying, so what is it that I want to work on in this quarter? Do I want to work on a family relationship? Do I want to work on my health? Do I want to work on, and choosing that, and don't make it like, okay, I'm working on my health. Well, I need to run like 10 marathons and just, make that focus more of how am I going to show up? Am I going to be fully present, or am I going to be distracted with the noise around me? Because it's really hard. So with that in mind, any last thoughts there?
No, I think that's good. We're going to keep talking forever if we're not careful.
So I hope everybody has a great week. And next weekend is the long weekend. So we will not be having just talking, but we'll see you back the first week after that in September, and we'll talk about
That's you and I. Yeah.
that's you
So
and I, and that's we're going to talk about job stuff then.
jobs.
So if you
Sounds
have
good.
any questions on job stuff, please drop them in, send them along to us, and enjoy the day.
Yes.
Okay. Love you all.